On a remote, vibrant planet far across the galaxy, there lived a civilization unlike any other. This world was rich with life, covered in forests that shimmered with iridescent leaves and oceans that reflected the twin suns above. Rivers wound gracefully through valleys, their waters sparkling with strange minerals that made them glow faintly at night. The air carried a soft hum of life, a symphony of chirps, clicks, and gentle roars from creatures that coexisted peacefully with one another. The inhabitants of this planet, the Zalarians, were a highly intelligent species, but they were not built for combat. Their bodies were delicate, their limbs long and slender, their skin pale with a soft bioluminescent glow that hinted at their advanced biological evolution. They had never needed weapons. Their world had always been safe, and they had spent countless generations developing culture, science, and art instead. The Zalarian cities were marvels of architecture, blending seamlessly with the natural environment. Towers made of translucent crystal spiraled upwards like trees reaching for the sun, while bridges arched elegantly across rivers, constructed from materials both strong and flexible. Everywhere, gardens and green spaces were incorporated into the structures, creating a perfect harmony between nature and civilization. The streets were lined with soft glowing lights, powered by the Zalarians' advanced energy systems that harnessed the planet's unique minerals. Technology on this planet was sophisticated, but it had never been focused on warfare. Instead, it was used to improve life transportation systems that floated silently above the ground, medical devices that could heal wounds in minutes, and communication networks that allowed the entire population to share knowledge instantly. Life for the Zalarians was peaceful and structured. They valued education and the pursuit of knowledge above all else. From a young age, children were encouraged to explore the world around them, to learn about the stars, the ecosystems of their planet, and the intricate workings of their own society. Music and art were essential to daily life. It was said that every Zalarian could sing, paint, or sculpt in some form. Festivals were frequent and celebrated not only seasonal changes but also the achievements of science, literature, and exploration. Stories of ancient heroes and explorers were passed down through generations, instilling pride in their history and an understanding of their place in the universe. Despite their seemingly idyllic life, the Zalarians were not completely ignorant of danger. For centuries, they had heard rumors from passing traders and wandering scholars of an empire far beyond their star system. This empire was vast, militaristic, and notoriously aggressive. Tales of planets conquered in mere weeks, entire civilizations destroyed or enslaved, and weapons so powerful that even the largest cities could be reduced to rubble spread quietly across the galaxy. For most Zalarians, these stories seemed distant, almost mythological, because they had no personal experience with war or violence. But as the years went by, whispers of the empire grew more persistent. Traders spoke of fleets moving closer to their sector, and strange signals picked up by their monitoring systems hinted at activity on the fringes of their space. Fear began to creep into the hearts of some, though many chose to ignore it, believing that diplomacy and reason could always prevent conflict. The political structure of the Zalarians was built around cooperation and consensus. Their leaders were chosen not by force or inheritance but by intellect, wisdom, and the ability to understand complex problems. Councils of elders, scientists, and diplomats governed every aspect of life, ensuring that decisions were made thoughtfully and fairly. The leaders were deeply committed to the welfare of their people. But the looming threat of an external empire posed a challenge unlike any they had faced before. They had always relied on negotiation, trade, and understanding to solve problems. But here was a situation that could not be solved by conversation alone. In the quiet moments, some Zalarians would look up at the stars and wonder what awaited them beyond their peaceful planet. They had studied astronomy extensively and knew the galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and potential neighbors. They had discovered other intelligent species, some friendly and some indifferent, but none had ever posed a serious threat. The concept of war was almost alien to them. Their strategies were always about prevention, understanding, and adaptation rather than confrontation. Yet the distant empire represented a reality they had never truly prepared for. Families continued their lives, children played in crystal-clear fields, and scholars worked tirelessly in laboratories. Yet, under the surface, an unease was growing. The Zalarians, for all their intelligence and cultural sophistication, had never developed weapons capable of defending themselves. Their technological achievements had been focused on improving life, extending lifespan, and exploring the mysteries of the universe, not on creating armies or battle machines. Even their strongest structures were designed to withstand natural disasters, not the firepower of an invading force. The planet itself seemed almost to sense the anxiety of its inhabitants. Once bright skies occasionally darkened with clouds that had no natural cause, and the bioluminescent flora dimmed slightly, as if reflecting the collective worry of the population. Scientists and scholars debated tirelessly, trying to understand the implications of the empire's expansion. They calculated probabilities, analyzed patterns of conquest, and considered every possible strategy for survival. Yet, no matter how complex their equations, the conclusion remained the same. If the empire arrived, the Zalarians would be defenseless. The Zalarians' reliance on intelligence, diplomacy, and subtle technology had always been their strength, but now it was a potential weakness. They were brilliant at understanding systems, predicting behavior, and negotiating treaties, but they had no experience with sheer force or brute strength. Their history had never required it, and so they were unprepared. Some argued that perhaps the stories of the Empire's might were exaggerated, a cautionary tale meant to inspire vigilance rather than panic. Others, more pragmatic, insisted that even a slight chance of invasion demanded immediate preparation. The planet's leaders held countless meetings, weighing every option, but the lack of military capability made them feel helpless. Despite their vulnerability, the Zalarians maintained a sense of grace and dignity. They continued their traditions, celebrated their festivals, and pursued knowledge with relentless curiosity. There was a resilience in their culture that could not be ignored. They had survived natural disasters, pandemics, and societal upheavals, always emerging stronger. But now, faced with an external threat unlike anything before, the question was whether resilience alone could save them. That as the story unfolds, this serene and intelligent civilization would soon be faced with a challenge that would test every aspect of their society. Their peaceful way of life, their trust in reason and diplomacy, and their very survival would be put to the ultimate test. For now, though, the Zalarians continued their daily lives, unaware of just how close the shadow of danger was approaching, and unaware that the course of their civilization was about to change forever. The peaceful life of the Zal, so carefully built over countless generations, began to show signs of strain as the distant threat of the Empire moved closer to reality. At first the signs were subtle, barely noticeable to the casual observer. Scout drones returned with unusual readings, sensors picked up faint signals from the edge of their star system, and merchant ships reported strange patrols in nearby sectors. These disturbances were easy to dismiss, but for the Zalarians, who had always been meticulous in observing patterns and analyzing anomalies, the evidence suggested something far more serious. The Empire, which had once been nothing more than whispered tales of devastation, was now moving toward their corner of the galaxy. At the Planetary Council, debates became heated. Some members, usually calm and logical, voiced fears that had been simmering quietly. "We cannot ignore this," one elder stated, her voice trembling slightly. "Our defenses are non-existent. If the Empire arrives, there will be no negotiations, no chance for compromise. We must consider every possible option." Another council member, more optimistic and cautious, argued, "Panic will only lead to mistakes. Our strengths are knowledge, diplomacy, and intelligence. Perhaps we can reach out and appeal to their logic, show them that our planet is worth more as an ally than as a conquered world." Yet, even as these debates raged, a shared unease spread among the population. Citizens whispered in marketplaces and transport hubs, exchanging stories of the Empire's ruthlessness. Parents worried about the future of their children. Teachers tried to maintain calm in classrooms, while privately considering what steps could be taken to protect their students. Meanwhile, the Empire's influence grew closer and more tangible. At first, the Zalarians noticed small incursions, survey ships entering their system, unannounced communications, and satellite scans that tested the planet's response times. The Zalarians had sophisticated sensors, and they noticed each movement with precision, cataloging every detail. The Council realized that the Empire was not content with distant observation. It was evaluating, preparing, and calculating strategies for invasion. The peaceful world that had never known war now faced a relentless adversary whose only language was power and domination. The alien leaders convened emergency meetings, gathering their most brilliant minds in science, diplomacy, and strategy. They studied the Empire's previous campaigns, analyzing the speed of conquest, the types of weapons used, and the responses or lack thereof by the planets that had been targeted. Each case painted the same picture. The Empire did not negotiate in the way the Zalarians understood. It conquered swiftly, leaving little time for resistance and sparing nothing that could be used against it in the future. The leaders knew that if they relied solely on traditional diplomacy, their planet would be destroyed. Yet, they were unarmed. Their technological prowess had been built to explore, heal, and sustain life, not to fight. In their laboratories, scientists raced to understand the possible threats. Could their energy shields be modified to withstand enemy fire? Could automated defenses be constructed in time? Could they create weapons powerful enough to even the odds? The answers were grim. Their systems, designed to maintain life and infrastructure, were completely inadequate against the overwhelming firepower of the Empire. Every calculation, every simulation, ended with the same conclusion. The Zalarians would lose if the Empire decided to attack. The Council faced a terrifying truth: they had reached the limits of what they could achieve alone. It was then that the idea of reaching beyond their sector took root. The Zalarians began sending messages into deep space, signals crafted carefully to convey both their plight and their intentions. They appealed not just for assistance but for intervention from anyone who might possess the means to confront the Empire. These messages were unlike anything they had sent before. They included detailed information about the Empire's movements, the planet's resources, and their own peaceful nature. The Zalarians hoped that by demonstrating their non-threatening stance, they could attract help without provoking aggression. Days passed with no response. Anxiety grew among the population. In the bustling city centers, streets that once hummed with laughter and commerce now buzzed with tension and whispered fears. Shops that had always been open late now closed earlier, as if the shopkeepers sensed the danger approaching. Schools organized drills, not for natural disasters but for potential invasions, teaching children how to hide and move safely in the event of an attack. Hospitals prepared for casualties they hoped would never arrive. Everywhere, the delicate balance of Zalarian life began to tilt under the pressure of an approaching storm. Then came the first signs that their calls for help might not be in vain. A faint, almost imperceptible signal was detected far beyond their star system. It was unlike any communication they had received before, complex, precise, and emanating a level of technological sophistication far beyond their own. The message was brief but clear. The Zalarians were being noticed, though they did not yet understand who had sent it. The fact that someone with immense capability had acknowledged their plight filled them with a mix of hope and apprehension. The council debated whether they should respond immediately or wait for further communication. Some feared that replying too quickly might reveal vulnerabilities, attracting the Empire's attention sooner. Others argued that hesitation could mean missing the only chance to secure assistance. After long deliberation, they decided to send a measured, cautious response, one that conveyed both their need for aid and their willingness to cooperate fully with whoever had reached out. This response was sent through multiple channels, encrypted and encoded to prevent interception by the Empire. It was a gamble their future might depend entirely on the goodwill and strength of a stranger in the galaxy as they waited for a reply. The Empire grew bolder. Their warships appeared on the edge of the system, sending scouts into Zalarian space. These ships were enormous and heavily armed, far beyond anything the Zalarians had ever imagined. The peaceful sky that had once been dotted with stars and shimmering satellites was now streaked with patrols, a constant reminder of the approaching danger. Panic began to spread, despite the Council's best efforts to maintain calm. Citizens began stockpiling supplies, reinforcing buildings, and preparing evacuation plans. Even though no one knew if escape was possible, the Zalarians began to understand the full magnitude of the challenge they faced. They were brilliant, intelligent, and resourceful. Yet all of these qualities could not compensate for the raw power of the Empire's military. The Empire had no interest in dialogue or diplomacy. It only recognized strength. The Zalarians were forced to confront the reality that their survival depended entirely on forces beyond their own control. This realization brought a new sense of urgency to every action they took, every message they sent, and every plan they devised. Finally, after weeks of tense waiting, a response arrived. The message was enigmatic and unlike anything the Zalarians had anticipated. It came from a species known across distant sectors for their unmatched combat abilities, the Deathworlders. The signal carried not only technological precision but also an unmistakable aura of authority and power. The Zalarians, reading the message, realized that the possibility of survival had arrived in a form they had never expected. Help was coming, but it was coming from a force so formidable that it could either save them entirely or bring unforeseen consequences of its own. The Zalarians now faced a new challenge: how to cooperate with a species whose reputation alone struck fear into the hearts of civilizations across the galaxy. They had never interacted with a force like this before. Their minds raced with questions. Could they trust the Death? Would their methods be too extreme? Could they survive the very aid they had called for? The delicate balance between hope and fear defined every conversation, every decision, and every heartbeat on the planet. Despite the uncertainty, the Zalarians prepared for what might come. Emergency protocols were refined, communication networks were strengthened, and citizens were briefed on the potential arrival of powerful allies. The planet held its collective breath, waiting for the storm that would either destroy them or be held at bay by the might of those who had answered their desperate call. Every Zalarian understood, in that moment, that their lives, their civilization, and the peaceful world they had built depended on the choices they were about to make, and the arrival of a force far beyond their imagination. The story of the rising challenge is not just about an impending invasion. It is about a civilization confronting its limitations, recognizing the dangers of the universe, and taking bold, unprecedented steps to secure its survival. The fear, the uncertainty, and the hope intermingle, creating a tense, electrifying moment in their history. It is a test of courage, wisdom, and trust, and it sets the stage for the extraordinary events that would soon unfold, changing the Zalarians' world forever. The tension on the Zalarian planet reached a peak that had never been felt before. The sky, once a canvas of peaceful stars and gentle auroras, now bore the heavy shadow of approaching warships. Scout reports indicated that the Empire's fleet had arrived on the outskirts of the system, their enormous vessels floating silently yet menacingly against the backdrop of the twin suns. The people of the planet could see faint glimmers of the ships in orbit, reflecting off the atmosphere like dark, ominous jewels. Every Zalarian knew that these ships were not here for trade or diplomacy. They were here to conquer, to dominate, and to annihilate anyone who resisted. Panic rippled through the cities, and the council convened emergency meetings, their faces etched with concern. The Zalarians had tried to prepare as best they could. Scientists had created simulations and tested defensive measures, but all their efforts seemed inadequate in the face of the Empire's overwhelming firepower. Even their most sophisticated energy shields, capable of withstanding natural disasters and extreme environmental fluctuations, were no match for the advanced weapon systems of the invaders. Communication systems that connected the entire population of the planet were repurposed to coordinate evacuations and organize shelters, but the scale of potential destruction was immense. Families huddled together, children clung to parents, and every corner of the planet seemed to hold a collective anxiety that was impossible to ignore. As the Empire's warships entered orbit, they began testing the planet's defenses. Drones and automated weapons installations were destroyed with precise efficiency, demonstrating a level of power that left the Zalarians both terrified and awestruck. The attacks were not intended to cause mass casualties yet. Rather, they were demonstrations, warnings of the devastation that would follow if the planet resisted. Entire districts of the capital city experienced power outages and communication disruptions as the Empire's fleet calibrated its strength, leaving residents scrambling to adapt and survive. For the first time, the Zalarians truly understood the scale of the threat they faced, and the reality of their own vulnerability was impossible to ignore. Amid this growing fear, the first real skirmish occurred. A small reconnaissance fleet from the Empire attempted to intercept Zalarian vessels attempting to flee to safer orbits. The Zalarian ships, fragile and lightly armed, were no match for the attackers. Within minutes, several were destroyed, and the survivors barely managed to return to the planet's surface. The news spread quickly, amplifying panic and despair. Citizens who had once walked freely through luminous streets now moved with caution, eyes constantly scanning the skies for the faintest glimmer of the enemy. Even the council, trained to handle crises, felt a chilling sense of helplessness. Every decision was a gamble, every strategy weighed against impossible odds. It was in this desperate moment that a new signal appeared on the Zalarian communication arrays. The signal was unlike anything they had ever received before, complex, powerful, and unmistakably authoritative. It was not the kind of message that came from diplomacy or trade negotiations. The Zalarians immediately recognized the technological sophistication. It belonged to a species renowned throughout the galaxy for their military might, a species whose reputation alone could turn the tide of conflicts. The Deathworlders had arrived. The response was immediate and palpable. In every city, the presence of the Deathworlders caused a mixture of awe, relief, and fear. These were beings whose very existence was intertwined with power and survival. Their ships, massive and bristling with weapons that the Zalarians could not even comprehend, appeared at the edge of the Empire's fleet. Each vessel glowed with energy fields that shimmered like molten metal, and the hum of their engines resonated across the planet, a sound both terrifying and exhilarating. The Zalarians could only watch as the scene unfolded, their hearts pounding, their minds racing with questions. The Deathworlders did not hesitate. Within moments they engaged the Empire's fleet, weapons fired with precision that seemed almost unnatural, striking enemy ships before they could react. The Zalarians witnessed what could only be described as unstoppable force in action. Entire squadrons of the Empire's ships were obliterated in seconds, leaving nothing but fragments that burned in the vacuum of space. The display was overwhelming, terrifying, and awe-inspiring. Citizens fell to their knees, not out of surrender, but out of disbelief. The sheer scale of the Deathworlders' power made them realize that the survival of their planet was no longer a matter of chance. It was guaranteed, but at the cost of witnessing a force so absolute, it seemed almost mythic. The Empire, caught off guard by the sudden arrival of such formidable allies to the Zalarians, attempted to retaliate. Their weapons fired, their fleets maneuvered, but nothing could penetrate the Deathworlders' defenses. Every attack was countered with a level of precision and devastation that left the enemy reeling. Entire sections of the Empire's armada were annihilated before they could even execute coordinated strikes. The Zalarians, watching from below, experienced a mix of relief and horror. Their planet was being saved, yet the sheer destructive potential of their new allies was beyond comprehension. It was a power they had never imagined, and it filled them with both hope and profound respect. On the surface, the people could feel the effects of the battle even without seeing it directly. Vibrations traveled through the ground from distant explosions in orbit. The sky above shimmered with unnatural lights as energy weapons discharged in patterns that left the atmosphere glowing for brief moments. The city sensors recorded intense electromagnetic fluctuations, and emergency services scrambled to maintain stability amid the chaos. Yet, despite the overwhelming spectacle, there was a sense of security. For the first time in days, citizens could breathe without the paralyzing fear of immediate annihilation. Amidst the chaos, the Zalarian Council worked tirelessly to communicate with the Death. While the Deathworlders had not yet landed on the planet, their message was clear. They were there to neutralize the threat, but they required cooperation and information from the Zalarians. Plans were made quickly, detailing the positions of vital infrastructure, the locations of population centers, and the strategic points that needed to be preserved. Every decision was critical. Even a small mistake could lead to unnecessary destruction. Yet, the Deathworlders operated with efficiency that left no room for error. Their communication was minimal, precise, and authoritative, reflecting their confidence and experience in situations like this. The critical moment came when a significant portion of the Empire's fleet attempted a last-ditch offensive maneuver. They concentrated their remaining forces to strike at the planet's main orbital defenses, hoping to break through before the Deathworlders could fully engage. The Zalarians, watching helplessly, could only brace for the worst. But the Deathworlders reacted instantaneously. With a coordinated strike that was both elegant and terrifying, they dismantled the offensive, destroying the fleet in a series of calculated explosions. The Zalarians watched in awe as the invaders were reduced to nothing more than debris, their threat extinguished in moments. In the aftermath of the battle, silence fell over the system. The Zalarians could scarcely comprehend what they had witnessed. Their planet had been saved, their civilization preserved, and yet the display of raw power they had seen would remain in their memories forever. The Deathworlders, having neutralized the immediate threat, hovered in orbit, their presence a constant reminder that the galaxy was not as safe as the Zalarians had believed. They had arrived like a storm, devastating and unstoppable, and had left behind a lesson. Power alone could command respect, and the universe was far larger, stranger, and more dangerous than the peaceful Zalarians had ever imagined. This escalation was more than just a battle. It was a turning point for the Zalarians. They had confronted the limits of their own abilities, witnessed the unimaginable might of a force beyond comprehension, and survived. The experience left them forever changed, their perception of the galaxy and their place within it transformed. The critical moment was not just the destruction of the Empire's fleet, it was the realization that survival sometimes depended on allies whose power was absolute, allies who operated on a level far beyond what they had ever encountered. From this point onward, the Zalarians' lives would never be the same. The arrival of the Deathworlders marked the beginning of a new era, one in which they would have to navigate the universe not only as a peaceful civilization, but as a species aware of the immense forces that shaped it. They had faced escalation and terror, and they had survived, but the lessons of that moment would echo throughout generations. The sky that had once been peaceful and calm now held the memory of firepower so immense it could have ended them in an instant, and the Zalarians understood that the galaxy was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. After the terrifying escalation in orbit, the Zalarians finally began to feel a cautious sense of relief. The Deathworlders, those legendary beings whose reputation alone could make entire civilizations tremble, had intervened with unmatched precision and power. The Empire's fleet, once a looming threat that had paralyzed the planet with fear, was now reduced to scattered debris drifting silently in space. For the first time in weeks, the people of the planet could take a deep breath, although the awe and lingering terror of what they had witnessed made that breath feel heavy with disbelief. The scale of destruction, the unstoppable force of the Deathworlders, and the sheer efficiency of their actions left the Zalarians both grateful and profoundly shaken. They had survived, but their understanding of the universe had been irrevocably altered. In the immediate aftermath, the Deathworlders began a methodical process to ensure the Empire could not return. They did not merely destroy the enemy fleet, they dismantled its entire capacity to wage war in the region. Remaining ships, weapons, factories, and supply stations on the Empire's border were neutralized with a level of precision that seemed almost surgical. The Zalarians watched from the surface, struggling to comprehend the scale of the power being wielded on their behalf. Each strike, each obliterated installation, demonstrated the Deathworlders' unmatched expertise in combat, planning, and strategy. It became clear that the threat was gone, not temporarily, but permanently. The Empire had been defeated in a manner so complete that it could not pose a danger to the planet again as the battle concluded. The Deathworlders made contact with the Zalarian Council. Unlike the Empire, these beings did not communicate in words the Zalarians could immediately understand. Instead, they used a combination of precise visual signals, transmitted energy pulses, and highly advanced translations that conveyed meaning clearly yet efficiently. The message was simple and unambiguous. The immediate threat had been eliminated. The planet was secure, but cooperation was required to stabilize the system and protect its vital structures. The Zalarians, still in awe of the force that had saved them, quickly complied. They provided detailed maps of the planet, highlighted areas critical to the survival of the population, and shared all available information about infrastructure, resources, and the layout of the cities. The Deathworlders analyzed the data instantly, issuing instructions to ensure no collateral damage occurred and that essential systems remained intact. For the this period was both terrifying and enlightening. They had always understood the value of intelligence and planning, but they were now confronted with a level of power that dwarfed anything they had ever known. The Deathworlders did not simply defeat the enemy. They demonstrated a model of strategic mastery that was incomprehensible to the Every action was deliberate, every move calculated, and every decision made with an efficiency that left no room for error. The Zalarians began to recognize that their civilization, for all its brilliance and sophistication, had existed in a bubble of safety until now. They were lucky to have survived, and the reality of what had been required to save them brought a mix of gratitude and a subtle fear of their new allies' power. Once the immediate threats were neutralized, the Deathworlders focused on stabilizing the planet's environment and infrastructure. Orbital debris from the destroyed Empire fleet posed a potential risk, and automated systems were deployed to safely remove or redirect these hazards. Satellites, communications networks, and energy grids that had been disrupted during the conflict were repaired or reinforced with technology far beyond the Zalarians' own capabilities. Entire districts of the capital city, which had suffered minor damage due to orbital bombardments, were assessed and secured. The Deathworlders' actions were swift, precise, and effective, ensuring that the Zalarians could return to a sense of normalcy while minimizing the risk of further harm. The Zalarians themselves were profoundly affected by these events. Citizens who had cowered in their homes during the height of the conflict now emerged cautiously, witnessing the aftermath of a battle that had taken place above their heads. The sky, once marred by the looming shadows of the enemy fleet, but it was now clear, and sunlight reflected off the planet's oceans and crystalline structures with a brilliance that felt almost symbolic, a return of hope after weeks of fear. Children stepped into the streets, wide-eyed and curious, while adults began organizing repairs and helping neighbors recover from the disruption. Though the threat was gone, the lessons of vulnerability and survival lingered in every mind and in discussions among the council. It became clear that the intervention of the Deathworlders had changed more than the immediate threat. They had altered the Zalarians' understanding of diplomacy, power, and survival. Before this crisis, the Zalarians had believed that intelligence, negotiation, and subtlety were sufficient for their civilization to thrive. Now, they understood that the galaxy operated under rules they had not fully grasped. Strength could command respect, and survival sometimes required intervention by forces beyond one's control. The council debated how to integrate these lessons into future planning. They did not want to rely solely on external powers again, but they recognized that alliances, strategic intelligence, and preparation for unforeseen threats were now essential parts of their survival strategy. During this time, the Deathworlders remained vigilant. While their immediate objective, the destruction of the Empire's fleet, had been completed, they continued to monitor the system, ensuring that no hidden threats remained. Their presence was imposing yet controlled. The Zalarians could sense the power in orbit, but they also felt a measure of protection. The Deathworlders' actions conveyed a clear message to any potential aggressor. This planet was no longer defenseless, and anyone who threatened it would face consequences beyond imagining. The Zalarians began to understand that the intervention was selective. The Deathworlders did not act indiscriminately, but only in situations where they perceived potential allies, civilizations worth saving, or strategic importance. The process of stabilization and resolution also involved communication with neighboring star systems. The Deathworlders sent signals that served as warnings, detailing the fate of the defeated empire and making clear the consequences of aggression. Nearby civilizations, many of whom had observed the conflict from afar, reacted with a mixture of awe and caution. The galaxy was learning that the Zalarians' survival was no longer solely their own. It had become an example of what happened when a civilization called upon forces that operated on a scale far beyond ordinary comprehension. The Zalarians themselves began to participate in these communications, sharing knowledge cautiously under the guidance of the Deathworlders. Through all of this, the people of the planet started to recover psychologically as well as physically. The immediate terror of potential annihilation faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. Families reunited, markets reopened, and schools resumed their regular schedules. Children played again in fields and parks, their laughter mingling with the gentle hum of a planet returning to normal life. Adults, while still aware of the universe's dangers, began to rebuild their sense of community and safety. The Zalarians learned to live with the memory of the battle above them, carrying both gratitude and respect for those who had saved them. By the end of this period, the Zalarians had gained more than just safety. They had gained perspective. They now understood the importance of preparedness, the value of alliances, and the reality that survival sometimes depended on forces beyond their own strength. They had witnessed unparalleled power, and they had survived to tell the story. The resolution of the crisis marked a turning point in their history, the end of immediate danger and the beginning of a new era, one in which knowledge, diplomacy, and strategy would be balanced by awareness of the universe's immense and sometimes brutal forces. The planet, while scarred by the events in orbit, stood intact. Its people, though shaken, were stronger in their understanding of both themselves and the galaxy. The Deathworlders, having completed their mission, gradually receded from immediate orbit, leaving behind a planet safe for the first time in generations. The Zalarians watched as these awe-inspiring beings disappeared into the distance, aware that the galaxy's balance had shifted and that their civilization had been irrevocably changed. They were survivors now in a universe that demanded both wisdom and caution. Asterisk in the days and weeks that followed the incredible arrival of the Deathworlders and the defeat of the Empire's fleet, the Zalarians began to confront the reality of what had happened and what it meant for their civilization. At first, there was a lingering sense of disbelief. Citizens would often pause in the streets, gazing up at the sky, half expecting to see the shadow of the Empire returning or the immense ships of their saviors still hovering above. The events had been so overwhelming, so far beyond anything they had ever imagined, that it was difficult to comprehend that their planet had actually survived. Families reunited after frantic days of worry, yet many adults found themselves sleepless at night, haunted by the memories of what could have been the destruction, the firepower, the lives that hung in the balance. As normal life began to resume, the Zalarians realized that their society had changed in subtle but profound ways. People walked with a newfound sense of caution, and yet there was also a renewed appreciation for life and the things they had once taken for granted. Children played in the parks and fields once more, their laughter filling the streets with joy. But they were now raised with the knowledge that the universe could be both beautiful and perilous. Schools introduced lessons about interstellar politics, the importance of strategic thinking, and the value of diplomacy and alliances. The story of the Deathworlders' intervention became central to these lessons, not just as a tale of survival but as a case study in courage, wisdom, and the realities of power. The council held long discussions about the future. They understood that their civilization could no longer afford to remain entirely self-reliant in the ways they once had. While their intelligence, culture, and technology had been remarkable, they had been insufficient when faced with a threat of immense force. Plans were drawn up to improve defensive capabilities, not necessarily to become a warlike species, but to ensure that they could survive until help could arrive if needed. Infrastructure was strengthened, emergency protocols refined, and communication networks upgraded to withstand unforeseen attacks. The Zalarians were determined to learn from this experience, understanding that preparedness was as essential as knowledge. At the same time, the people grappled with the sheer scale of the Deathworlders' power. The saviors of their civilization had acted with efficiency and force unlike anything the Zalarians had ever witnessed. While there was immense gratitude for the intervention, there was also awe and even subtle fear. The Deathworlders had demonstrated what was possible in the galaxy, a reminder that strength, precision, and decisiveness could alter the course of history in ways that intelligence and diplomacy alone could not. Many Zalarians realized that they had been sheltered in a universe far larger and far more dangerous than their everyday lives had suggested. This recognition instilled both humility and determination. They would never again take their security or peace for granted. The immediate recovery efforts were enormous. Teams of engineers, scientists, and volunteers worked tirelessly to repair minor damage from orbital skirmishes, to restore communication systems disrupted by electromagnetic pulses, and to ensure that the cities were safe for citizens to return fully. Markets reopened, public transport resumed, and energy grids were reinforced. The population, though still emotionally shaken, found purpose in reconstruction. Community gatherings became common, with citizens sharing experiences, comforting one another, and celebrating the fact that they had survived an event that could have ended their civilization entirely. The bond between individuals, families, and communities strengthened, creating a social resilience that matched the technological and strategic resilience being developed. Beyond immediate recovery, the Zalarians reflected on the lessons learned from both the threat and their salvation. They understood that the universe was filled with forces beyond comprehension, and that survival depended on awareness, alliances, and the courage to seek help when necessary. The story of their near destruction became a lesson for every citizen. Caution and preparation were essential, but so was the ability to recognize opportunities for aid from extraordinary sources. The Deathworlders' arrival had not only saved their planet but also shown the value of decisive action, calculated risk, and the importance of understanding both allies and potential threats. The Council began implementing long-term strategies to ensure that the Zalarians would be better prepared for the future. They invested in advanced research, exploring ways to enhance their defenses without sacrificing their peaceful way of life. New divisions were created within the government, focusing on interstellar intelligence, diplomacy, and strategic alliances. The Zalarians recognized that survival did not require abandoning their values but rather strengthening them with practical measures that could protect the civilization in a universe where power often dictated outcomes. Psychologically, the population experienced a mix of relief, gratitude, and reflection. Many adults found themselves contemplating mortality and the fragility of life in a universe that had seemed so distant and controlled. Religious, philosophical, and cultural leaders emphasized the importance of reflection, encouraging citizens to appreciate the present, honor those who had suffered in the crisis, and remain vigilant for the future. Art, music, and storytelling flourished as a way to process the events. Songs, poems, and narratives emerged, capturing both the terror of the invasion and the awe-inspiring might of the Deathworlders. The crisis, though catastrophic in potential, which became a source of inspiration, driving creativity and strengthening cultural identity. The Zalarians also began to reach out to neighboring civilizations, sharing their experiences and warnings. Diplomatic envoys were sent to nearby planets and systems, explaining the nature of the Empire, the events that had transpired, and the presence of the Death. This outreach served multiple purposes. It strengthened alliances, spread awareness, and subtly communicated that the Zellarians were no longer isolated or defenseless. Their survival story became a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope, demonstrating the importance of preparedness, intelligence, and alliances in a universe filled with unpredictable dangers. Over time, the Zellarians' relationship with the Deathworlders became clearer. While the Saviors had been selective and precise in their intervention, the Zellarians recognized that they had been chosen for a reason. The Deathworlders did not act for charity alone. They intervened where they saw potential allies or civilizations that could contribute to a larger balance in the galaxy. This realization gave the Zellarians perspective on their place in the cosmos. They were no longer an isolated, peaceful society. They were part of a larger network of civilizations, connected by the realities of power, survival, and influence. This awareness transformed their outlook, creating a sense of responsibility to maintain their civilization's integrity and contribute positively to the galactic community. Families, scholars, and citizens continued to share stories of the intervention. Children were taught about courage, trust, and the importance of seeking help in times of need. The narrative of the Deathworlders' arrival became a foundational myth, not of fear, but of wisdom, resilience, and hope. Public commemorations were held, combining solemn remembrance with celebration of survival. Monuments were erected, not only to mark the events but to serve as reminders of the lessons learned. The universe was vast, challenges were inevitable, and the courage to act wisely could save even the most fragile civilization than personal reflection. Many Zellarians began to contemplate the fragility and value of life in ways they had never done before. The events forced them to think about their civilization's purpose, their place in the galaxy, and the responsibilities that came with survival. Philosophers debated the ethical dimensions of calling for such immense help, considering the consequences and responsibilities that came with relying on a force of near unstoppable power. Religious leaders encouraged gratitude while emphasizing moral responsibility, reminding citizens that survival was both a gift and a duty to preserve the values that had defined their society for generations. By the end of this period of reflection, the Zellarians had transformed as a civilization. They had survived an existential threat, witnessed power beyond comprehension, and emerged wiser, stronger, and more cohesive. Their understanding of the galaxy had deepened. They knew now that danger was real, that survival depended on alliances, preparation, and courage, and that intelligence alone was not enough in a universe where raw power could dictate outcomes. The Zellarians also realized that the Deathworlders' intervention had been a turning point, a defining moment that would shape not only their immediate recovery but also their long-term strategy, culture, and worldview. Life gradually returned to a new normal. Markets flourished, educational institutions thrived, and the planet's natural beauty was once again celebrated. Yet, every Zellarian carried the memory of the crisis, the awe of witnessing unstoppable firepower, and the gratitude for their survival. Their civilization had endured not just through their own efforts but through courage, wisdom, and the intervention of allies whose might was incomprehensible. The Zellarians had learned a profound lesson. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous, but survival was possible when knowledge, preparation, courage, and alliances were combined. The story of this event would be passed down through generations, becoming a cornerstone of Zellarian culture and identity. Future leaders would study it, children would hear it as a tale of caution and inspiration, and scholars would analyze it as a case study in strategy, diplomacy, and resilience. The aftermath of the crisis, though challenging, ultimately strengthened the civilization, leaving them more aware, more prepared, and more appreciative of both life and the forces that had preserved it. In this way, the Zellarians moved forward, changed but resilient. They understood that the galaxy was a place of immense possibility, danger, and wonder. They had survived because of their intelligence, their courage to seek help, and the extraordinary intervention of the Deathworlders. And while the shadow of the universe's vast dangers would always linger, the Zellarians had gained something far more enduring: the knowledge that survival, growth, and hope were possible even in the face of overwhelming power. Their civilization would never forget the lessons of that moment, and the story of the Deathworlders' arrival would echo through history as a testament to courage, wisdom, and the extraordinary possibilities of the galaxy.